Hello, hello.
How are you?
Hi.
I'm doing wonderful, I must say, only because I get to spend a little time with you two, distract
Oh,
me from the world for a moment. So thank you for joining me today.
of course.
This topic is near and dear to my heart, as you know. So I'm going to introduce myself, let you two introduce yourselves. And then we've got a topic that I know a lot of people are here to hear what we have to say, but also engage in this conversation. It's not as easy as talking about and then it's solved. That being said, I think we're getting closer to solving. All right. So my name is Deidre Diamond. I'm the founder and CEO of CyberSN and Secure Diversity, co-founder of the Day of Security Conference. CyberSN is 11 years old, and I passionately work to serve our community with solutions for humans, for the human side of us all. And that's workforce risk management these last 2.5 years specifically. And so that's what I'm here to focus on today with some great security leaders in Kelly and Carrig. So I'll let Kelly and then Carrig introduce themselves, and we're going to jump in. All right, after that. So, Kelly.
Well, Deidre, thank you so much for having me today. I am equally excited to spend time with you and Carrig. I love you guys both so much, and I think this is a really important topic to talk about. So I have almost 30 years of experience in tech. Really have grown up and been really active in the Boston tech scene. So I oversee security, technology, and enterprise applications for my organization today. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Carrig.
Well, same. I feel so honored to be included. I mean, as we were just discussing behind the scenes, Deidre, you're famous, and it's fantastic to get this opportunity. Kelly, one of my favorite people. I don't have anywhere near the experience you guys do. I'm right around a decade, but in part because I came from the intelligence world before that. So I spent almost a decade, or a little over a decade actually, in the intelligence field, spending a lot of time overseas. And frankly, a lot of that has translated, right? And this is such a really important topic, talking about the people that are behind defending our companies, defending our country, because it's the people that matter. And we can have all the tools in the world, but the people are what really, really matter.
Totally.
Currently, I'm the VP and head of global cybersecurity for a Fortune 200 multinational company. This is my fourth gig building a cybersecurity program. And so I have real experience with these personnel issues and challenges behind that. And I'm really excited to talk about how we solve that moving forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, before I get started, let me say this, that the opinions of all of us here today are our opinions, not the opinions of our organizations. And considering how long this problem has been going on, it's certainly not our opinions of just recent, meaning workforce risk. Let me put these stats here on the screen. Are we seeing these stats, team?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Imagine that.
There you go.
Oh, it went. Okay. Is it there now? Yay, there it is. Yay. Okay. Did I not go in SlideShare, huh, Carrig? Am I in SlideShare? I'm good.
Not yet. Nope,
No.
you're still on the...
Goodness, I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, here we go. So it was about 5 years ago that I started calling for compliance control for retaining and developing cyber talent, getting out, speaking at our conferences, talking to organizations about these stats. These stats aren't just from 2024, although they are recent stats. My point is that we started seeing burnout in our organization. I think really seeing it. I'd love to hear what you two think. For me, it's been 5 years, 6, 7, maybe. I started talking about it 5, but I think it was there longer. And I think we all know that, these types of stats, having been around that long and increasing, are very concerning, extremely concerning. In fact, this is the kind of stuff that feels like if we don't fix it, we lose. right? Because to
Yeah.
your point, we can buy tools, and we are, and we all know how many tools get bought and never really utilized. uh, these stats are scary. Yeah, they are scary. I'm not putting them here to scare us. I'm putting them here to say, let's get really in tune with the problem, and then let's go deeper into the problem. I feel like people think burnout is like work hours or something. This is all burnout, right? It's the result of burnout.
Right.
So did any of these, I know these didn't surprise either of you, but did anything really stand out as to the percentage rising since you two started paying attention to this, or anything in particular on these stats?
I will say over the last 10 years, things are better than they were, right? I have, in some ways at least, but in other areas, they're really not, because with cyber on the news every day, it's far more front of mind. It's far more, we get customers and suppliers and those that we work with our organizations, they care about it more because they see it. We have more compliance regulations coming out, and yet we kind of have this challenge of cybersecurity being seen as a cost center. And so we constantly have staffing challenges. And okay, how do we justify that we actually need these people if we're not really bringing the organization money as a result of those people? And how do we frame that conversation so that we can help the organization understand the value that cybersecurity staff provide? But when you look at like the turnover challenges, 61% over the 12 months. How do you train up the new folks you have to backfill them with? Like, how do you upskill? How do you maintain some of the organizational knowledge without losing all of it? I mean, a lot of these things are really, these are pretty scary numbers, even if that wasn't really the intent, because it's the challenge we've been facing for years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't mind scaring people as long as it helps them get into action mode. The reality is, I think most people don't know these stats, and to your point, they're devastating. You never get caught up. It is what this says. Kelly, anything come to mind specifically?
Yeah, I agree with Carrie. I think the 61% it's an eye opener. If we think about 10 years ago, I think burnout has always been there, but we're in a better position today, not because people are burning out any less, but because there's visibility, there's conversation about it, like we're doing today, right? If you think back even like 25 years ago, if you said, hey, I'm going to a therapist, or I'm going to a psychiatrist, or what have you, it might have been perceived as negative or taboo. And again, my opinion, nobody wanted to talk about burnout because it was almost a sign of weakness. Oh, you can't handle it. So I think we're getting better because of the visibility, but the problem doesn't go away. And the problem is also like not just the organization and the culture. You can build that culture into your organization to say, hey, don't work on the weekends, et cetera, et cetera. It's the person. So a lot of people in our field are take a lot of ownership in what they do. And they feel this personal connection to staying connected to the threats and vulnerabilities, to making sure that the organization is safe. And so it's really important as leaders to make sure that you're continuously reinforcing, we have backup plans. This person is on call. This person is not. Take the weekend, reset, refresh. Because again, to Carrick's point, threats are constantly emerging, and we're having to keep up, even on the weekends. And so if you're not taking that time to have that balance and get that rest or disconnect from it, it can be all consuming.
I mean, part of that's a great thing. And what I mean by that, not the burnout part, but the part that in our industry, in the cybersecurity field, and it's a small crowd, right? I mean, relatively speaking, it's a small community, and it's a community largely made up of very passionate people who want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's a pro and a con, right? Because it means that you have people that genuinely care. They want to go out, they want to solve the problems, they want to make sure that nothing gets missed. And so you can scream from the top of the mountain, hey, work-life balance, work-life balance. But when they realize that, there's nobody else on right now, or I need to go help someone, like it's a balance because of that passion. So
Yeah.
I think, workforce risk management from a cybersecurity perspective is something that for a long time we felt, but didn't really know what to call it. And now that we are recognizing, okay, there's actually a process here. There's a way to work through this. When you upskill, when you give people a reason to be there, when you can staff appropriately to avoid burnout, when you can, all of these small attributes can really bring a lot to the organization. But, working through these pillars that you have on the screen, I mean, this has been the status quo for a long time.
Well, I love what you both were saying about, it's getting better in that we have conversations about it. It's not taboo to talk about mental health, and we all understand that people are great, people with great intentions are still burning out. And that's when it really hit me, having gotten into the workforce in January of 1994, before the digital era. Burnout really was, in my opinion, an individual's responsibility to manage, because we were, and I ran armies of teams, having to deal with this kind of stuff. It was teaching people how to utilize the time when they're not at work, like for all the things they need to do and get done, and how to run a schedule to get your workouts and everything in your time with your family and all that. But there was also no cell phone, no way, I had a beeper on in those days, and cell phone didn't come till much later. I remember having a beeper on with my suit in my 20s. And so, now we're there's no such thing as off, specifically in security and IT. We want to have something called off, but we're not going to have it unless these things in these pillars start to correct, like, meaning we as organizations recognize that it's our responsibility to make sure our people don't burn out, just as much as theirs to manage, the things that we used to manage well before the digital era. And so, when I started thinking about supporting the conversation in more detail, these things under these three pillars is what generated off of my old school pen and paper, which is how I do my thinking. And so, yeah, I mean, and I still see these things all the time in spaces. And I want to point out a few of the things that I think have become more and more of a problem, and then ones that have gotten a little bit better. Maybe I hear what you two think about that too. I've highlighted cyber talent is hard to justify and or understand as, I think, the core of it all, and certainly one of the main places cyber SN really moves that needle. But let me start by saying that workload complexity combined with people managers that have been promoted from being individual contributors that are wonderful without management training, without really having the resources to care for their people. These two things have, in my opinion, while we've gotten better at talking about it, these two things are not getting better. Because, to your point, the attack surface is growing constantly, and people were already burnt out. It's growing. Yeah, we're talking about things and we're telling people to take time off or to not work on the weekends or to not do, but they do. I know I had to change my holidays, not had to, but I realized during COVID that one of the ways I could get my people more unplugged was to make sure that every federal holiday were off, and that we close down around the times that people typically take, vacations. 4th of July, New Year's and Christmas, close down for longer times, like thinking about when my clients are closed, when the market's closed. So anyhow, my point is to say that we are saying to folks, take time and making sure they have vacation and such, but it doesn't change whether or not they're really off, because do we have backup? Is there somebody to cover? Is there enough policies and procedures in place that somebody doesn't have to get interrupted to help? Are just a few of the things that come to mind for me. The policies, procedures, and people managers that aren't trained to be people managers in EQ skills. And so, those are the things that I feel like I'm just seeing get worse, because when we start to squeeze with an economic shift, like usually that's what goes first, empathy for others.
Right.
Or an economic focus. Now, again, I'm talking at the whole, and that's not everybody, or that's the majority of what I see. But, there's lots on these pages. Like how many times I've heard people talk about, well, I have great training budgets, but there's no time for people to truly get upskilled or not. Maybe there's time for them to take the classes, but not study for the tests, and how do we get that stuff in our calendars and mapped, is the answer that to me there. But when you first saw these pillars, what happened? Were you still thinking things are getting better after you saw the stats and you're like, I think things are getting better, but did this change anything for either of you?
Well, I think there's a couple of really important things that you can call out on this. And I think you made some really good points, Deidre. I mean, if you think about how we've trained managers in the past, historically, and I think this goes for not just cyber, but most roles, we didn't train them to manage remote employees, right? COVID hit, and all of a sudden there was a very different paradigm shift around how does a manager even manage at that point? They can't see them working. Do they know how they work? How do they define what that work is? And I know this from experience because I work from home, it's really hard when your office is right there at home to turn off that switch. So while I completely empathize with those who are against return to office, I also see a lot of the benefits for return to office in some cases, because by going back to the office, it's you provide a little bit of an easier scenario to manage, and potentially an easier way to define, okay, when does that work-life balance come into effect? I mean, we don't really have those conversations very often, but I think they're important conversations to have. When I saw this slide under the workload complexity, I went back to your last slide talking about human error, right? And the human error isn't just because tools are getting better and we're just not getting smarter. I mean, my cell phone has made me dumb for all intents and purposes. I used to know all my friends' phone numbers. Now I don't know any of them, right? Because I've got a cell phone for that. And I think we see that some of that same stuff when it comes to our tooling, whether it's our regular employees who continue to be the weak link for the attackers to attack, or whether it's our analysts who have tools that are maybe good 80 or 90% of the time at what they do. And so, or they're not good at all. And you get so many alerts that you just give up, right? You get so sensitized to seeing alerts, you're not digging in the way you're supposed to. So that was another thing that really resonated was, 80 some percent or whatever that number was, I forget on that first slide, of breaches related to human error, whether that's the cybersecurity staff, whether that's the employees of the organization, that really resonates. And I think that by better planning on whether we're educating our staff, whether we are, better planning around the workload for those that are on our cybersecurity teams, better defining what work-life balance looks like, maybe doing things like there have been some really, progressive companies out there mandating time off, 2 weeks at a time, at least once a year, for example. Hey, we're going to force you disconnect your accounts. You're going to go away for 2 weeks to go refresh. I don't know if it's necessary to get that aggressive, but I like where these companies are thinking in that. How do we solve the problem? And all of that leads to, okay, now that we recognize these problems, how do we solve it? How do we move forward and better understand, instead of being an ad hoc approach of just a conversation here or there, how do we take a more deliberate, programmatic approach managing the risk of these challenges among our people, so that our teams stay happy and healthy and productive and catch the bad guys.
I love that you just brought up remote, managing people remote, because that we already had a system that promoted individual contributors into management with little management training. That was already the system. And when you're managing people in person, it is a lot easier to pick up on problems and issues and what have you, because you're seeing the person body language, right? All that. And so I think, you're dead on in that this remote work and lack of training of managers is a big problem. And I think one of the pieces that is why it's such a big problem is that we as individuals and just as humans, we like to label, things so that we can understand and categorize. And the way we've been labeling talent with titles is incorrect. So analyst 1, 2, 3, engineer 1, 2, 3, security engineer. Well, those days are gone. It's IAM engineer, cloud engineer. And if you're an analyst, it's very specific things that you're doing and there are no more 1, 2s, and 3s. And so what has happened is, because we're not sitting by each other, hearing the commotion, hearing the problems that come up when somebody asks somebody to do something and doesn't understand really what they do, and is being asked to get involved in something, all of that still happens. People still get asked and pinged and, can you help me with this, and all those things based on a title or maybe some information. And then, that falls into a lot of promotion criteria and all this stuff. So I just can't help but think about how we couldn't pick out a few of these things that could really change the game, to this is overwhelming. There's a lot of pieces here. How do I get to all of this? Well, I think there's a few things, like really understanding how you're utilizing your talent, and them understanding that you understand how they're being utilized and how they feel about that, but also how that translates into your org's capabilities for cyber or IT, what have you. I feel like it's this, the talent's lack of professional efficacy is our number one problem. Whether that's in our own cyber orgs or any org, like you said, Carrie, any org, it's that lack of professional efficacy that causes people to be less engaged, or they're in overwhelm because of it already and make mistakes. So what can we do? Like, that's how I want us all thinking, and it's how what can we do to make some of this stuff go away? Meaning some of the stuff that's really causing this lack of professional efficacy. And being that CyberSense had, talent acquisition now for 11 years at scale, it's like one of the most top things we hear is I'm undervalued. My skills, what I can do, how I'm being utilized is nowhere near what I want to be utilized for. And that to me seems to be like the bigger one that kind of also ties into getting enough talent so that they can be doing the things that they were hired to do, and they're not getting sucked into all these problems just because they can solve them. Like, just because I can solve these problems doesn't mean I want to solve these problems.
Right.
So to me, that's the focus. If we can spend our time there, that's going to save us a lot of headache, getting people into professional efficacy. Easier said than done, right, Kelly?
Yeah.
For ourselves too.
I mean, I can share a couple of things that I do with my teams to try to address some of these. And let me add the disclaimer that I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect.
No.
You try something. If it doesn't work, you try something else. But there's a couple of things that both of you said that I want to elaborate on. One, Carrie, when you said shutting off the access, it's funny you should say that. I don't know if you saw me smile. I will say to my direct reports when they're like, okay, like I'm going on vacation, I'm going to Disney World, I'm doing this. I'm like, I don't want to see you online because I will cut your access off. It's not a threat, it's a promise. I don't want to see you engaged. I want you to spend time. Like, the work will be here when you get back. And by the way, if you feel compelled to get online and to do something, that means we have a gap. You're a single point of failure in something. And let me help solve for that problem. I think underutilizing talent, AI is helping with that. Making sure that an old boss of mine a very, very long time ago said, $100 resource, $100 problem. So looking at the alert fatigue and understanding where you can put automation in place. And I'm going to say, let the robots do the low level work so that you have that talent and that expertise that you can really tap into on your staff from a human standpoint to solve those hard problems, because nobody wants to pick up 50 different alerts and say false positive, acknowledged. It's such unappreciated work, and it's a waste of time. So I think, like, looking at automation and bringing in things that can solve for those lower level tasks are important. I think the back to office debate, um, again, nothing is perfect. It depends on the individual. Some individuals cannot work from home. They just can't. They're distracted. They're going to do a load of laundry. They're going to, they're going to not be able to focus, right? And they need that in office presence for that. Some people, Carrie, to your point, resonated with me when you were like, I'm in my office at my house and there's no separation between work and home. So I deliberately have to make an effort to log off by a certain time, and I have to go through certain rituals. And it sounds weird, so then I'm not working a 15-hour day, because it's very easy to get sucked into that when you're just in that zone. Collaboration at the office is something that you can have virtual collaboration, but there's something around the human aspect of seeing somebody in person. Like, I've seen both of you. I saw you both out at RSA. That's where we met, Deidre. Carrie and I have seen each other on numerous occasions at vendor events and cab events. And it's just like, I feel like more connected to you guys because we've sat down and shared a meal, or we've sat down and I can look you straight in the eye and you can give me real feedback or thoughts and ideas, thought partnerships and things like that, versus being over a camera. So I think there's benefits to both.
I couldn't agree with you more, Kelly. I mean, I remember meeting Deidre for the first time at RSA, geeking out over people metrics. I didn't know who she was. I'd never heard of the company she works for. It was just, we were just talking about people. And, I had a rudimentary way of tracking that. I don't like the telephone game. I don't like hearing from my people leaders how their people are doing. I'd rather hear it from the people themselves, right? Historically, I prefer where possible to avoid the telephone game, because I think it's important for us to get clarity from the people, the people that are themselves impacted on how they're doing. How's life? How are you? How's the family? How's just showing that we care? Because how can they feel comfortable coming to us when they have challenges if we're just this figurehead that they're not comfortable sharing that information with, or sharing that, hey, work-life balance sucks right now, or hey, I really love my job, but I can't do these hours, not realizing that was never the intent to make them do those hours. I think it's important to have a line of communication that's open with those on our teams that are doing the majority of the work. I mean, yes, managers, the managers manage people, sure, but it's the people that they manage that are frankly doing a lot of the nuts and bolts of what we need to get done. And the most important people in our org are those that are doing the nuts and bolts, frankly. So if we can't hear from them, if we don't have an effective way to measure what what their happiness is, or maybe happiness is the wrong word, but happiness or satisfaction, job satisfaction, or belonging. Do they feel like they belong on the team? Are they doing the right job? I mean, we have to be able to figure that stuff out. The other point that I was thinking of on this, Deidre, that I think is really important for part of this, and I forget what you said that made me think of it, but it's really important, and that is we tell people, hey, you're the security engineer, or you're this. But if we don't have those conversations, if we don't have a way to actually measure or document what they think they're doing, it's harder to catch things like, oh, hey, this guy's just super nice and he's always helping out his friends in these other departments. And it's not his job, but he's always super busy because he's just an awesome dude. Like, if we don't know that, how can we help them create the structure to manage that? I mean, it's critical information because it may not be part of the job duty. It may not be listed on anything as far as their job responsibilities, and yet it's still taking up a significant part of their time. Not time that's necessarily being wasted doing personal stuff like laundry or whatever, but stuff that's still helpful. It's just not necessarily right. The stuff that they should be doing as part of that role.
Yeah, I love that you use the word happiness survey. You can leave it as happiness survey. I like it. That's what we call it. I thought, and you actually mimicked the exact words that we use in the happiness survey after we document what everybody's doing, like you're seeing here on your screen in this mock org.
We don't see anything. Oh, there we go. It's coming up now.
There it is. Because to your point, if you don't know how your talent's spending the time, like what with IAM are they doing and how much time with IAM, right? Or how much time they're spending on other functions and keeping it updated like you can here in the CyberSN system, then how can you stay on top of how they're doing? Like, we have to have a baseline conversation of at least them knowing that we understand what they're doing and how they're being utilized. So that's one piece to happiness. The other piece to happiness, and I'm moving over to the capabilities, portion here of the CyberSN platform, is to say, where are the gaps and of an entire cyber org, all the pillars. If I'm an individual on your team and I know that you know how I'm spending my time, and I know that you know what I like about how I'm spending my time and what I'd like to do with my career, and then if I know that you know as a leader that we've got gaps of places where people aren't touching anything, but also what I want to do with my time that can fill in those gaps, and you as a leader have a plan. Well, all of a sudden, if I'm somebody that's not motivated, not inspired by career development, don't feel like I'm understood or being utilized well, that all is gone. Mm-hmm. And this isn't a one-time thing. It's now something managers need to own on their own too, right? Is that ability to keep the job descriptions updated, keep the capabilities updated, keep the happiness check-ins updated. And when we do that, I think you're right. I think we can move the needle. We're not going to be perfect, because there's no such thing. We are humans, and there's still the EQ side of things that we all can error on or be stressed out about or what have you. To me, if and I'm going to stop sharing and just come back to you two as we wrap up here. To me, this can move the needle enough where we can catch our breath. If our people feel like they don't have all the answers right now, but they're putting together, my leaders are putting together the strategy to solve all of this, all of it. And to your point, Kelly, with AI on this alert shit, and we're gonna document what everybody's doing over here, and we're gonna keep it updated, and anytime we get taken off of a functional role, it's gonna show our capabilities have changed as a cyber org, so we can continue to sell and get the budgets we need. This will lighten the load of the problems. And so, I think Garrick, you said you were, in the Stone Age. I just love that you said that. So I want to say it before, which means Excel spreadsheets for this kind of stuff. Do it on your own. Hard to keep updated. Right? Doing this for your people, but doing it in a way that's very difficult to get a lot of value out of it. Yeah,
for sure. A lot of lift. Yeah, I mean, having an easier approach, an easier way to see it, to visualize it.
Yeah, I mean, especially in today's day and age where we are more remote and everybody's got to digitally communicate no matter what. We can't get things done without that communication. So, we need to do this, the three of us, regularly and look at those stats and work our whats with our peers out in the industry to lower them. Because, one of the things we didn't talk about that's on there is that, we have a gap in skilled professionals. So if we don't get on top of this, burnout then turns into people do leave or they stay burned out. Either one's no good. Health issues, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So we have an obligation as leaders to put in these systems for workforce risk management. I do believe a lot of this also solves some compliance work that I'm working on with some tags too, regulators. Yeah, in terms of how we're managing our capabilities, how we're on top of our capabilities. I've found that out from a few clients in highly regulatory industries that have told me that screenshots of the platform is solving that. So I'm going to spend some more time there too, because that can help us all move the needle as well. But, this is about us figuring this out together. And so I really appreciate, I know how busy both of you are, weighing in on the conversation, sharing how you're feeling, which overall you're feeling like you're making progress. I love that. And we need more of that. So thank you for sharing. And I'm gonna ask it. We get together every 6 months and say, okay, are we moving it more? Or, not in our own, but as a collective. You hear the stories too, like I do. You get the calls from your peers. You all know, go to conferences, you hear things. Like, we're gonna keep this going if you don't mind.
Well, this has been really fun. This is a necessary conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to host
it. Went too fast. Next time, I think I'm going to do an hour, and all the listeners, you let me know if you'd like an hour, because it felt really, really fast.
We could talk about it for 5 or 6 hours. I feel like I have a million things to say, and I think like your platform and what you've put into it is important. I mean, I built out 87 different profiles myself by hand, and it took many, 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 many hours. And now, keeping them up to date, they probably are already stale. In fact, I know that they are.
Right.
It's funny. I was going through my books this weekend. I want to end on a note where I found the Phoenix Project. And years ago, I had met one of the authors of the book. And what you said around how do I know what this person is doing, and if they're doing other things on top of it. I don't know if you've read the book, but I remember the character Brent, and I forgot his name, but it was the person that was doing everything. He was the single point of failure. And like the key is, if you don't know what your staff is working on, and there is a retention risk there, where's the business continuity for that person if they are working on a bunch of different things that you don't even know about? That's a risk to the business. So
yeah,
we're all trying to solve the same problems. It's hard, but I am dedicated to helping solve it. I love you guys. I wish we could have talked more. Let's do it again, please. Thank you for having me.
Totally. And so well said about, the change. How long, I think it's 90 days at best, or when somebody comes and goes on a team, of how long a job description becomes applicable to somebody. And that's the challenge. So how appropriate to end with the change and change control is our duties to managing workforce risk. And the better we can get at that every day as leaders, the more professional efficacy we'll create for our people and the more we'll get done. And with AI, it's true. I agree, Kelly. With AI, we should be able to get some of these useless alerts, fatigue out of our lives, which will also make a big difference. So thank you for sharing your wisdoms, your knowledge, both of you. I love you. Have a great rest of your day.